with Matthias and Hannes that you have seen before. So today I'm going to talk about combining multiple RDF graphs in the browser. So this is based on a first iteration on an extension of RD forms, which maybe Matthias talked very briefly this morning. So a bit of background. You've heard that there is a lot of open vocabularies in the web, and we are reusing them, and that's a good thing. And as you can see here, the most known and used is DC terms and FOF. FOF stands for friend of a friend, so that's a vocabulary for describing people and agents and some properties of them. So yeah, just to mention here, some of the properties are depiction, where you show an image of an agent or a person. Nose, which is a very interesting property. It states that an agent or a person is familiar with another agent or person, and we're going to use in today's example together with made, where we say that an agent or a person has created some a resource or a thing or a piece of work, really. So, and the LOD cloud, as of today, I was surprised actually not to see this picture in many of the presentations, but we saw it at least in once, I think. So yeah, that's the state as of 2017. Around 1,000 data sets, a lot of links, a lot of domains, and some of the most linked ones are DBpedia, Freebase, which now it's not anymore, and it's acquired by Google, and it's called Knowledge Graph. It's what you get when you search for a person or something which is very popular, and you get a box on the right hand side. And LinkMDB, which is database for movies, so the same as IMDb, but with linked data. So there is a lot of data in linked data in the linked open data cloud, and every year it's growing. A brief detour. RD Forms is a library for editing and presenting RDF about resources. So we're talking about resource level now, specific things, and not really the cloud that we saw before. So here we have an input, which is an RDF graph, and also the resource in this RDF graph. So I want to use in the form a specific resource, and this specific resource I give it as an input as well. Let's say that in this case is example.com about. Also I have an RD Forms templates, which is a JSON structure to with which I represent an HTML form, really, and how to combine the properties in the RDF graph or the entities in the RDF graph in an HTML way. And we can see that this structure over here is talking about a property which is the color of a house, and you can select between two choices, blue and red, and the RDF engine binds these two and creates a form with the color of a house, and then you can select if it's blue or red, and when you save this form, then you can get that the color of example.com about is blue. In this specific example, it's already blue, but we could change that, and that would change to red, for example. This is work that mainly has been done by Matthias, and just to mention that here we work with a specific graph, a local graph, and one resource. Yeah, again here you can have more complex templates You can have groups, so you can build really quite deep forms, because you may say that a person has an address, and usually the address is a deeper form in itself with other properties like the city or the house number and other stuff. So in this specific case, it's the name, and of course you can specify the cardinality. So how many of these properties can I have in my resource? Names, usually we have one. Birth dates, the same, but for people that have doubtful birth date, you may have two. So you cannot really restrict it. That's why we say a minimum and a preferable amount of properties for a specific resource. So here we have an example in DBpedia talking about the painter Leonardo da Vinci, and this is an RD forms. This is a form in DBpedia that has some properties and some values for Leonardo da Vinci for that resource. And here the screenshot is not aligned well. And also we have another resource, another page, so another graph that talks about the same entity, which is Leonardo da Vinci, and it has properties of its own. And really the task that I wanted to challenge is how can we go from a single entity in a local source to a single entity to both local and external sources. So I want in one form to see information about Leonardo da Vinci that was stated in DBpedia, in another source, and in my local application, because I want to enrich the information about Leonardo da Vinci. So that was the goal, and it's time for a demo. So I will bring up the editor of this form. Good. So it's supposed to be loading a thumbnail as well. Here he is. Leonardo, a bit late. So here we can see that the top part is static. It has nothing to do with the form. The form starts here, where we have properties about Leonardo da Vinci, which is a thumbnail. And we can see here that the thumbnail is actually a property from the DBpedia ontology, and I have loaded here that information that we saw in the previous example in this form. So that is the first graph, and the second graph is FOV. So what I want to do in this demonstration is use DBpedia plus FOV, which is a friend of a friend ontology, and try to create a new graph about Leonardo da Vinci with enriched data, which has both the DBpedia and the local ones that I'm going to add. And so we have thumbnails here, and of course I can add a new thumbnail. However, DBpedia ontology is a bit strict about that. They say it's reserved for DBpedia, so I'm not going to use their property. I can use the FOV property depiction, so I can add here a value of a picture, which we're going to do later. More here, I have the death date and some of his works, so for some reason they were not all there, maybe because they were not in DBpedia, or actually, as we'll see, they were in DBpedia, but they were not linked. And these are links to DBpedia itself, so yeah, we can see here that the same kind of format as we saw before. The death date is not disputed really, so there is no need for adding a new one. Also, I have an eye over here which shows me the source of the triple, because this is really a triple about Leonardo da Vinci, and this is the source of the of the field. So thumbnail and birth name and that data and works, they come from DBpedia. So a first attempt to show this in a different way in a form was to make them non-editable. So they are not editable right now, the values, because they come from an external source. And I've added some properties from the full vocabulary into my template in order to enrich the information about Leonardo da Vinci. So here I'll just go to search for Leonardo da Vinci image, let's say. And of course we will probably do this in a better way, but for now I'm just gonna grab one from Google search. So biography.com, it looks good. I'll copy the image address and I'll add it there. So nose, I really like this property. I really like to make connections between people, and I would really like to put some names that Leonardo da Vinci had met throughout his life or had known. So the values now are being fetched from DBpedia. So I created manually a list that searches for all the people of the Renaissance in Italy. And some of them, for example, is Machiavelli. So we know that he had contact with Machiavelli, good friends. Another one was Michelangelo. Yes, they didn't particularly like each other. And let's say Verrocchio and Salah, his companion. So these are some of the people that Leonardo da Vinci knew. So what about made? So something that was made by this agent, faux ontology. Okay, so here we have already works. So made and works are kind of similar. So in an ontology alignment world, we will try to make them play well together. I will just ignore this for, and I'll say that I'll add works that are not in DBpedia. And I'll leave the integration to the ontology alignment. So I'll add here, for example, La Bella Principessa and The Last Supper. There's a lot of them. Let's go again. Well, I suppose the filtering doesn't work well, so I got one of them. And also I can bring up a dialog as well. So here there is a list of paintings from the Renaissance, which is from DBpedia also. And we can search with the amazing facility of Google Chromes. So I can search for Leonardo and some of these paintings. Let's say Mona Lisa, what else? Last Supper, Bella Principessa. Okay, we'll go for this, Bacchus. I'll select that, and I have that piece of work as well, which is made by Leonardo da Vinci. So in the end, I am happy with my progress. I've enriched the information about Leonardo da Vinci, so I'm going to export this graph.
There's a data, are you aware that there is a data image on the depiction? You mean?
Yes, yeah, it will cope with that, okay. Yeah. I hope it will cope with that. So I'm going to export the graph. So this is an encoding of RDF, specifically RDF JSON. So I'll just get this RDF JSON. This is now the merged graph, both the local and the external from DBpedia. And I'll copy this and I'll go to my present page. And of course the top is static, and it's just asking me for a graph. And I say render this graph. And I have new stuff. So I have the thumbnail, which is loading. Yes. I had this stuff before, DBpedia, and I have the FOF, which is the local, and the nose relationship and the maid relationship. So, let's get back to the presentation. We are here. Good. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. The first iteration on supporting both local and external graphs in RD forms. So we manage that. We can load one or more external graphs in RDF. We presented them differently, slightly. It's not editable. They are a bit grayed out, so it shows that they are not from. The origin is not the local source that we're editing, and also you can check the source as well. And we can export that as a newly created graph. Now, if we want that, or if that's a common use case, probably not. So we may want to just export only the local graph and have the external graph only for the presentation mode, just to see what else has been said, so we don't have to duplicate ourselves. And the next steps really is to present this in a bit more nicer way, maybe with some specific groupings per each external graph, so it's immediately clear where every piece of information is coming from. And then it becomes more tricky when you start to consider things as validation of the graph. So how many birth dates are we going to have? Are we going to have one? Or are we going to capture the case where historians don't agree that for the date of the birth date of a specific person? Then comes a question in RDF and RDFS schema. We are always consistent. We are always asserting things about the world which are not clashing. But if you go to more expressive languages like OWL, then you might be in trouble. For example, you might have that Leonardo da Vinci is both a person and the airport, because the latter is referring to the airport in Rome. So then your form is not going to know what exactly am I presenting, an airport or a person. And yes, and then last, really trying to handle all the structures in our form, which are deeper, as I said before, the address. So if I have the address for a person from an external source, should I be able to reuse this in my local source, or is it just by default of the external graph and I'm not able to touch it because of blank nodes involved? That's pretty much it. Thank you. Guess I was pretty fast.
Perfect. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah. When you were searching for other people that
Yeah.
Da Vinci would know, inside of that menu, there's a little search engine, I guess. Does it look for other people in DBpedia or in your own little?
In DBpedia, yeah. So I mean, that was a custom example. So it searches for all the people in the Renaissance in Italy. So there is a topic for that in DBpedia, so I can just query that and it will get me all the people that they were around at that time. So yes, that's a valid question. Whom should I show? Who are those people? Are they the DBpedia people, or should I construct them locally? That's a valid question also. But because we have URIs, why not reuse them?
Because if you instead of knows would have, I don't know, have been studied by,
Mm-hmm.
then you would have names of authors who have written books about it.
Yeah.
Then your timestamp is a lot bigger. So
Precisely.
It becomes more complicated.
It does, yeah.
But that's up to the constraints of the form, of the template.
As well. as well. If you're searching for painters that he might have known or authors that might have known him, so you can put a constraint on that as well. So I can say that all the entities that are shown in this select window should be of this type and have these certain properties.
So it's up to the one who builds the form, to which purpose is it to be template. What question?
Valentino, so I see you wrote this Node.js. So it runs a server to do this wonderful munging. But how much do you feel this needs to be server based? Do you think it could? You could do this client side?
Which part are you referring to? The everything's in client is in the browser. It's client side. Everything is JavaScript.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's just that's why the picture was late to load and everything. Getting the picture and everything.
I have a short reflection.
Yeah.
That's terminology. When we're talking about this, you said local graph and external graph.
That's another thing. Yeah.
Well, I understand that because I'm part of Meta Solution and our discussion here. But maybe we should talk about enhancing graphs, like we are combining and enhancing graphs. So the form you see are from a couple of combined graphs, and then you are enhancing it with an additional graph, all in the same form. I'm just saying that there is some terminology here to make it easier to understand what's going on. Because in many cases you can present some information you retrieve from one system, and then you can provide an enhanced piece of information below it. But now we're doing everything in the same place.
Yeah.
Which can be a bit tricky.
Do you think you can use with or work with distributed development with those forms when it's combined, when the graphs are combined without any manual interaction, where a human needs to see does this go all right together, or?
Well, are you referring to creating the form itself?
No,
or
the merge of graphs, the enhancement of graphs. Sometimes maybe
okay.
conflicting information.
So yeah, I understand. As I said over here, I think if your information is encapsulated within certain boundaries, RDFS in this example, you don't have a problem. You don't have a problem. I mean, you can. You're not invalid. Of course, it might not be correct. It might not align with reality, but you don't have a problem. But with more expressive languages like OWL, then it's going to be hard to decide which piece of information to keep and which not, and which one is causing the inconsistency. Did I understand right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see a solution on it.
Yeah.
How to work to do it? Do someone always have to be the police to say this is okay, this is not okay, or can everything be automated? Or is that
it might be the case that it's not only a question about is it okay or not. It might be a different opinion. Like even in Wikipedia, we have that. So stating facts is easier in linked data. AAA, as we said, yeah.
As a comment here, that the one who defines the template is the one that has the power. The template says what should be shown and not shown. So, for instance, if you were to include a third graph from, for instance, DIA, which is this authority web database with a lot of information, I think there is probably a lot of information about Leonardo da Vinci there. And if we haven't prepared the form to actually show that kind of properties from that source, they won't show up. And you won't be able to edit information that you haven't specified in the template that you should be allowed to. So that also means that information will not be visible. So there is a special mode of RDF forms where you can say, try to show everything. And then you just load it with loads of small templates, which can be combined to show whatever you throw at it. But that's kind of a complex mode because the user interface will be very unpredictable and depending on what kind of graph you have. So it's better to know that for this specific purpose, we are going to work with this kind of information from these sources.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Valentino.
Thank you.
We move on. Now it's Miles.
233K. That's fantastic. Just downloaded it. But that's before you run the npm init. And then, yes.
It's around 500K when built.
Oh, I do have HDMI. That's really fantastic. Woo! Hi, everybody. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Hello, everybody. My name is Miles Byrne. I live in Helsinki. I work at Finnish Institute for Molecular Medicine, at the Biomedicum in Meilahti, beautiful part of Helsinki. Been there since 2009. The reason I'm there is because my wife is a cancer researcher and she runs a cancer lab there. And I wasn't going to let her get away by moving to Finland. Just some things I've done quickly. I was in the GenDefend consortium, genotype to phenotype. I worked for Grassroots Enterprise, making an e-democracy platform. I introduced the World Wide Web to the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. Sorry. I worked at the oldest library in the United States and converted a unique old colonial card catalog into an electronic system. Sorry. It was such a great card catalog. So, yeah. Linked data and the revolution in academic publishing. Of course, if you're aware there's a massive revolution in academic publishing, please raise your hand. Oh my God. People, there is a massive, so you guys, you're aware what's happening with Facebook and with Cambridge Analytica. This connects deeply and directly to what you're all working on, to the attempt to make the data on the web integratable, to make all the computers on the web one big computer. The things that are happening right now are pushing our whole field forward so fast. It's like a roller coaster just dropping. So I want to try to get a flavor for that today. This was just a few days ago in the Atlantic. If you didn't see it, and when you actually look at it on the web, this is actually it's like a GIF. It's actually burning. Academic paper format is burning. Beautiful. But there's a lot of. Has anybody read this article already in the Atlantic? 2 people. Hey, you call yourself geeks, or maybe you're the real geeks because you're not. Other stuff, but so the deeper you look, it's so deep. Young scientists are just like, I have no career path. It's a giant academic Ponzi scheme, and now I have to do all this shit for the journals. They're just like not doing it. So you have Bjorn Brems. If you're a scientist, if you're a biologist, if you're interested in changes in academic publishing, you got to follow this guy. He's fantastic. He works on Drosophila, but he's an amazing person to work on who was it? Ole. As Ole said, the culture. He is really working on the culture of scientific publishing. So he published this paper last year. In Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, demonstrating a peer-reviewed paper that if you get your paper published in a more prestigious journal, Nature Cell Science, it's even less likely that your paper, statistically, is reliable than a mid-level journal. And he claims that and multiple other papers as proof. Here's another one, journal impact factor, adverse effects. It's coming down like Facebook. Really hard now. But, and this is an image I grabbed from Bjorn Brems from one of his presentations. This is, I guess, hopefully if you get this, many of you will be nodding. IT has a solution, round wheels, to carrying the data. But everybody's stuck, students, postdocs, journals, faculty, they're still using the square wheels of 16th century medieval publishing metaphors. But not, by the end of this year, this scene is going to be very different already. Now, about half the slides in this crappy presentation are not even mine. They're by this man named Herbert van der Sompel. Has anybody heard of him? Herbert van der Sompel. Oh, sweet. So he's at Los Alamos National Labs. Kind of like Tim Berners-Lee was at CERN when he, working on scientific communication, scientific information, research computing, came up with the World Wide Web, 91, 92, 93, right? Herbert van der Sompel is kind of in the same mode. He's that kind of guy. Great guy. So I'll show, I'll give more information about him and make it easy for you to find him later on. And I'll say every slide that, Jesus Christ, is his. So this is one of his slides from a recent presentation. And that's the next slide. And this is what I'm looking for. So decentralized web is becoming a big theme. And what does that have to do with linked data? Well, that's another presentation. But here he introduces that the decentralized web is happening. There's all this huge focus on blockchain. Just to give you my opinion, blockchain is a massive distraction. Fantastic science, but don't try to implement shit with it. And because the nature of the web as a peer-to-peer medium with crypto, with good public key, and if we figure out the social problems of using public key infrastructure, of having private keys and public keys and using them for all communications, we don't need blockchain. A few large institutions need them, and that's it. We shouldn't be distracted by it. But he points out that the W3C, I heard one of you say this in a Swedish way, like W3C, and thought it was very cool. And of course, that's Tim Berners-Lee. His most recent project is the Solid project. Please raise your hand if you've heard of the Solid project. This is, thank you, of course. This is really fantastic symposium. Everybody here is really getting a great overview and learning a lot. And I was really late here too, sorry, but this is great. So what's happening with Solid and how is that related to linked data in academic publishing? Here's the Solid logo. It's an MIT project headed by Tim Berners-Lee. Very small team though. I think it's like vacillated from 5 to 10 people. Here's one of the projects that's come out of it, Docchielli by Sarvan Capodilisi. He's at Bonn. And like I heard one of you in the group back there mentioning linked data fragments from Ruben Verborg at Ghent, and all is going to Belgium.
Yeah.
You're going to Ghent, aren't you?
Yeah.
Knew it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, these guys, this guy, Ruben Verborg, they are on the leading edge. He made a web-based, it's your work, Valentina, reminded me a bit, completely in the client side, completely in your browser, and yet you're writing a scientific paper, you're writing any kind of document seriously, for anything in academia, actually. And it's client side, it's decentralized, just like you can do with Valentina's work. You're not relying on a centralized server and all the, as I've heard many of you saying, yeah, but then they're going to say that's not what I meant, and that's not the right interpretation of the data. if we stop being so based on everything coming from these single servers, these silos, of course, as you've heard a million times, then that problem is going to start to go away. So this is this fantastic in-browser editor, DocYelly. Where's the link? Here's its features, some of its features. It's an HTML plus RDF editor, but you don't have to write any. It's supposed to be WYSIWYG, and you don't have to actually know how to code. And it's coming along great. Is this already revolutionizing academic publishing and make everybody able to use linked data in a simple way? No. In fact, he needs to see Valentino's work and maybe talk to him, because what you've done is so simple and clear, and he's a little more complex, you know. So he might learn something from the cleanliness of your presentation. And this is under the auspices of the W3C, and he's working directly under Tim Berners-Lee, trying to bring the semantic web and linked data into general use. Here's more. So there's the features again. Machine-readable linked data documents, trying to automate the creation of that without having to even look at RDF. But when you read this, if you read this Atlantic article, were they talking about this? No. They were talking about Wolfram Mathematica and Jupyter. That's basically it in the article. That's their, you know, so this is how they're talking about what's happening. Woefully incomplete. As if the notebook format, here, this is from the Jupyter homepage, Jupyter Lab homepage, and Jupyter's trying to really become a universal standard, making a document, notebook document format, and some other really well-designed, open, JSON-based products. But it's not like, for instance, your work, Valentino. It's not, and like Sarvin's work, because to run Jupyter, you need to run a server. And of course, how many people here use Jupyter or IPython? A lot more. The scientists show themselves. And Jupyter's fantastic, isn't it? Especially if you know and like Python. It's really awesome. And as a way to quickly compute and quickly get results, the notebook format is fantastic. But that's not all there is. I mean, there still is Wolfram Mathematica, which is brilliant. Just people can't stand the guy that wrote it. There's eLife Lens, Substance. There's also Stencila, which, has anybody here heard of Stencila? Please. So a guy, Nocombe Bentley, based in New Zealand. There's some really amazing hackers in New Zealand. Dominic Tarr. He's created something called Stencil A, as one word, Stencila. It is being called by others, not by me, but I agree with them. It's being called the biggest advance in spreadsheet format, since VisiCalc. I'm not going to show it here, don't have the time, but check that, and I didn't even put it on the slide, but check it out. But anyway, my point is, the scientific paper it's being replaced by notebooks, but the problems I've heard you all talking about of how to, and you've been talking about the right problems. How do we integrate different data sets? How do we resolve, is this Leonardo da Vinci the person of the airport? Things like this. They're not answered by that. So it's part of the solution, but it's not all the way. So what could be the whole solution? Here is Herbert van de Sompel's full name, his Twitter. There he is at Los Alamos. He gave this presentation at, God damn, what was the name of the CNI fall last December. I really recommend everybody to make a note and watch the presentation. It's like an hour. But I'm going to steal a few of his slides here. Can I move on from the slide?
Yes.
So he says, what's coming next for scholarly communication? Deconstruct and decentralize? Well, some of you guys, I mean, I came really late, but I've already seen some great deconstruction. But what is the actual path? What is the actual practical path that scholarly communication can follow? And just like Tim Berners-Lee, Herbert really, in this presentation, he really tried to lay it out. He said there's 3 paths. First path, discipline-oriented preprint servers. Open Science Foundation. You know, for instance, an article about your real estate ontology. Where are you? Thank you. There he is. Could be a preprint. If you wrote a paper about your ontology, that could be you could submit that to the architecture preprint server from Open Science Foundation. I've been hearing some things like, who did Elsevier just buy? Was it OSF? Did anybody hear that? A major organization for open data and open scientific communication was just bought by Elsevier. Anyway, so
April 1st thing?
A what thing?
April 1st?
You
were joking about that on
shit! You got me. Oh, that totally fits. But anyway, there's path 1, discipline-oriented preprint servers. I mean, preprints are really important, but it's a stopgap, right? That's not actually going to solve the larger problems that you're all addressing here, which is how to get all of this information integrating unto itself so that it can break out of the scientific disciplines and be used by everybody. Path number 2, institution-based repositories. Current repositories, next generation repositories. Yeah, but that's not a solution either, so I'm not going to break down the slide. But again, this is one of Herbert's slides. Path number 3, here it gets interesting, the researcher pod. Who here has heard of the idea of the personal data pod? Yeah, good. Everybody in this room, even if I wasn't here blabbing at you, everybody in this room will know a lot about pods by the end of this year. Because with Facebook crashing fast, the pod is the solution. What does that mean? This is a little bit too busy. And I don't actually agree with the particular solution. So let's get into what a pod is. Here's a researcher, 2 researchers, Alice and Carol, and there's a professor, well, another researcher, sorry. And they each have their personal data stores. And so what is a pod? It's the same thing if each of us paid for a web server and had our own personal website, our own personal data in that server, except you don't have to actually buy the server, you don't have to maintain it. The idea of the pod is that a server and this whole environment is made for you. And all the technical problems are abstracted away, are automated away by some really good design like Valentino's. And I will bet any of you a piece of smørrebrød that by the end of the year, everybody's going to be like, "Oh, my pod! Hey, like, you want to share pods?" It's like this. I am here to say this is what's after Facebook. So again, though, what really is the pod, and what does it have to do with academic publishing and with linked data? Well, the beautiful thing about the idea of the pod is it's a complete. I've been hearing you guys like banging your heads up against. We could have a utopia of data integration if only people could. Oh, and X, Y, Z, A, B, C. If only we could get over all of these problems with all of our different points of view. But a pod, this is such a busy slide. I'll leave it up for another. A pod is the answer because instead of all the data primarily residing with institutions and on their private servers, all personal data now is connected to a person and it's person-centric. What we used to call, like 10 years ago, user-centric design, now called self-sovereign design. It's another phrase. I'm sure you've all been hearing it, or if you haven't, you will be hearing it until you're sick of it by the end of this year. Self-sovereign. which is the new way to say user-centric, although it's been developed much more fully since those days. A pod is a different kind of institutional repository. Am I doing okay? Contributor-centric, user-centric instead of document. About the person. The person becomes the anchor, and then all of the ontologies and all of these questions about ontologies, about merging them and resolving conflicts. As we've been hearing from several people, the decision is made by the person as the agent. And if everybody has their own pod, if everybody's making their own decisions about the interpretations of data about themselves and coming through their personal server, their pod, then the whole thing is flipped. Let's look at that a little bit differently. Here's the current reality. All these different institutions, banks, hospitals, all the kinds of municipal institutions, Ole and the gentleman from Gothenburg, thank you, are talking about and are bringing into the present day and the future by making open link data. But they're all if all of these institutions are trying to munge the data, combine different data sources about one person, you, it's just a mess because everybody has to agree it doesn't work. If the data already belongs to you, if you control it, if the technological issues with that are worked out, and they have been worked out. As of the last few years, it's worked out. Then the underlying complexity and difficulty of the problem of data integration, it's not all solved, but it's totally flipped. It's totally flipped. In legal terms, in financial terms, in terms of agency, decision. It becomes a kind of data democracy. So what is this slide? We go from correlation point to control point. We move to it being user-centric and person-centric. Is this a slide explaining this solution, which is solid? Wherever that was, yeah. No, this slide is not even about solid. This slide is about the, oh God, it's cut off. Is a project, sorry? Exactly, thank you. Did you go to the conference last year?
Nope, but I know it and I'm engaged in it.
Yeah, Antti and Kai. Excellent, it's great that you're talking with them. But I hope to talk with you about that after because the Ministry of Transport and Communications in Finland funded this project. It's up at the top, it says My Data, MY Data, a Nordic model for human-centered personal data management and processing. So, Finnish state-funded project to create a user-centric data system in competition now. I think technically they came out before Solid started broadcasting. But really in competition now with it, unless they figure out how not to be in competition. Here's some more of my data slides. So these slides, of course, are not mine again. These are from Kai Kukiniemi and Antti Yogi Poikala in Helsinki. These are great guys. They would really love to be here, I know. There's a My Data conference. The second one will be this year, still to come, in Helsinki. And it's just like this, but a lot more people. And then a lot of corporate types, but it's all right. Thank you. Human-centric. So it's, and there you have a service model, as I've heard some of you talk about. So it's another, so now we have competing ideas of recentering all the data and the user. And I'll just, sorry, I've gone over time. I haven't really made my point. So I'll close with this slide. This is Amartya Sen, the Indian philosopher of social justice and big inspiration at the UN with the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And I think it was you, Ole, when you were talking about culture, and you said something in particular about people versus information. Sen says it's in Indian, it's Niti, Indian, Punjabi? Niti versus Nyaya. which is we focus on, yeah, you said systems. Oh, you all been talking about this. We tend to focus on systems and arrangements and rules and get the model train set working well, but we need to focus on what actually happens and the actual lives. And I've heard you, in the conversations I've overheard, I've heard you all speaking to that. So you're all on the right track with that. And thank you for your attention.
So I think we are a little bit short of time, but maybe one question.
Yeah, when you mentioned these different projects, do any of them have any relation with Upspin? There's a
Oxpin.
project called Upspin. It's a more
Upspin.
technical-oriented project, but it started by Rob Pike at Google. He met
How did I not even hear about this? Upspin by Ron Pike.
Rob Pike.
Rob Pike. I have heard that name.
They might be a bit more technically oriented, but it seems the same idea.
Of like a pod, a personal data store.
Yeah, and also, yeah. I don't remember exactly, but I think it's...
The MIT Solid project is trying to create personal data stores entirely out of new data.
Right, okay, that might be it.
Short comment. ActivityPub used now by Mastodon or these new social media alternatives to Facebook.
Yes.
V3C standard actually supports JSON LD as well. So the connection to what the Berners-Lee is doing now with Solid would be interesting to see what's the actual difference.
Actually, they're integrating ActivityPub.
Okay.
It's really coming together around Solid. But, next presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrew, and today I'm going to talk about something like before we end up in this pod society, we need to jump over one more hoop. And that hoop that I'm going to be talking about is that value does not just lie in linked data, but in order to extract some value, you need to have linked data services. So we'll start, the slides are online. If you want to click the links, etc., they'll be probably also available later. We'll start from publishing RDF, but then we'll start with write access. If you have a service and say you have some taxpayer information where you file your tax returns, and if you want to make it linked data, one way is you just let people download an RDF data dump. But a far more useful thing would be to create a form where you file your tax return, and behind the scenes, linked data is used. And then we talk about some classical problems that we encountered. So how do you do linked data, right? You start with an ontology, then you produce a data set. For the pundits, data set can include an ontology, yes, but I'm simplifying. And let's talk why data sets are not enough. I started talking about this, but it boils down to systems where data sets, or what can be called a data set, change very frequently, on an order from minutes down to milliseconds. Or systems like Google, they have measures in thousands of queries per second or more. And every query can modify the data, so your data set will get outdated half a millisecond later. And another premise is that many systems don't just push data in and out. They do actually some real work in between, and that's why you pay for those systems. You have some complex ERP system. There is a lot of logic inside of it. There is a lot of work that came into it. You can just reduce it to just a little bit of data and its database. And one of the options, you can just access the database directly. We've been talking about this. You have some solutions, they talk to your database, and out you get RDF. Basically, you skip this application. I don't have time to go into this, but basically, if you need to write the data back to the application, this model doesn't work. Usually because there are so many rules that are encoded in programming languages. Typical example, a system may check if your age is above certain value. And sure, there are ways how you can check it through pure use of linked data and ontologies and more advanced things. But you typically don't want to do that. Those systems usually, they're very expensive. You just want to keep them in place, and you don't want to run a risk of, for example, missing some rule. And systems, I mean here, typical systems you procure for your enterprise. And I'll show a demo later with systems like Jira that are used commonly for bug tracking, change requests, and Polarion, a Siemens product for application lifecycle management. So why we want to build linked data apps is in red, you see something that is proprietary. And also this communication protocol is proprietary. Proprietary also means a JSON protocol that you need to read the documentation for many hours. And then you write a very custom integration. And the problem when everybody talks to this application, you need to duplicate this over and over again. If we put a linked data application in front of a main application, we can isolate the proprietary part to that single integration layer, so to speak. If we imagine a lot of apps and a lot of linked data apps, that, so to speak, becomes the integration layer. And then our whole enterprise architecture can be integrated through the use of linked data technologies, while we can have what is called business continuity. We don't have to deprecate all of these applications. And all humans that use those systems, they can still use them through common interfaces, like GUIs. All right, so how do we build those apps? Tim Berners-Lee laid out 4 principles for doing that. So using URIs to name things instead of just identifiers, allowing people to look up those things through URIs, and when they do look up things, give some standard representation like RDF, and finally link to other things. So let's go through some approaches. RDF dump clearly does not satisfy all of those requirements. It uses URIs names, yes, but it does not allow you to look up things through HTTP URIs. It does provide information in standard RDF form, and it does include URIs, but use of lookup is critical because that's why we use URIs in the first place. They're not just identifiers. They're means of what is called dereferencing, basically getting something that you point to. And Sparkle is also not enough. And if you disagree with me, the last argument that I have is go talk to your enterprise security or IT, and they'll tell you, what is Sparkle? If you define it formally, it's an RDF database management system. And 101 of enterprise IT, you do not expose your data layer, data access layer to users. You need to have a 3-tiered architecture. So you have to have some application in between. And basically all the innovations that happen around advanced triple stores that say you don't need this middle layer, they're basically increasing a lot of functionality to basically become those 2 layers. If you're interested, you can look at, say, MarkLogic. They have really interesting range of services on top of the triple store, but they're basically growing into such a monster, so to speak, of providing 2 tiers. So let's take a step back and see, can we implement a linked data application very simply? How pressed we're on time? I have a small demo. Basically, I wrote, I think like it took me half an hour to develop a very simple linked data application in Python, which is very short. And what it allows you to do is to perform 3 HTTP requests. So you have a URI, and what you can start with, you can do an HTTP GET request. So let's get some information about localhost/LDSV18. So we do a request, and we see the error code here, 404 not found. Okay, so let's put something into our application on that very URI. And we see result 201 created. Let's now get the information about this. So we have RDF. It does content negotiation behind the scenes. But now this is something interesting. There is some information about enemies of Spider-Man. And if your boss is passing around, they'll say, linked data is useless. It's toy stuff. So we go back to the slides. So you can see basically implementing a very simple linked data app doesn't take a lot of time. You basically allow resources to be put on a certain URI and retrieved from that URI. So let's now formulate some of the requirements that our imaginary boss would come up. Oops. All right. So first, we should forbid uncontrolled and unvalidated data modification if we expose some linked data through a service in a read-write mode. Then, because things are tightly connected, we want to get notified or at least somehow track when resources in one linked data application change from another one. For example, if a new bug request is created somewhere, we want to cancel some shipment order to, for example, inspect something. Basically, that's the reason why you interconnect all your systems. When there are a lot of resources, we want to do some search. And then finally, there are so many features. How do we discover what is possible to do with all this linked data? Because again, we're putting all that semantics for the purpose that people don't have to read PDF files and figure out whether it means A or B. So let's start with the first thing that linked data community came up with. It's a notion of a collection. Say you have emails or you have conferences, as I was showing, LDSV 18 resource. That LDSV resource conceptually belongs to a collection of all conferences. There are some technicalities behind it. It, for example, allows you to define strictly post semantics, how to create a new resource inside of a certain collection. And also allows you some interesting properties like paging. If you have 10,000 resources, you can have a collection and you can go through them in hundreds. It sounds pretty basic for semantic web experts, but it's something that every enterprise needs once you hit a certain number of resources. And then it also functions as a point of entry. You have certain resources. Let's stick to conferences. You have a way to dereference or basically to ask a service, tell me what all conferences you know all about. And basically you start with the conference collection and you look through each and every of those. There are two main efforts. I'm working here from the assumption that you're all very excited about linked data and you will try to go and implement this in your organization tomorrow. So I'll include some references on technologies you can actually look at. And the first one is W3C Linked Data Platform. Basically something that is a standard or recommendation. I highlighted in green. I don't really have time to go into the technicalities, but basically they allow you to group resources in collections. And there is also a Hydra standard. It's a draft. Unfortunately, it's not compatible with Linked Data Platform, but it has a more holistic view, what's known as hypermedia. And they try to create a hey to us API definitions for those interested in those details. But okay, let's get back to validation. Now we have a collection of resources. We still need to prevent rogue users or users that just have fun from adding ice cream resources into a collection of conferences. So one way is, again, as I said, no standards, nothing extra. You just do a validation inside of your applications like you did for many, many years. It's simple, but there are two problems with it. First, it's opaque. Your user doesn't know what you're checking. When you have a check, it just returns an error code. And previously, when systems were used by humans, it was okay. You see an error, you understand the text. So ideally, we would like to have some standard that would both clearly explain what do we expect from users and also what the errors are. And there are three technologies that all operate under a notion of a shape. Shackle is a W3C recommendation. OSLC shapes is a weaker and older version, which has less features than Shackle, but can be more easily implemented. And Shax is a more advanced thing than Shackle that allows you to have very expressive definitions of shapes. And if you are interested to learn more about validating RDF data, there is a fresh book. Just to give you a taste, here is how a shape looks like. So we define a certain shape, and then we say that this shape is about a conference. And there are two properties that we want to verify. First, we want to verify that a property with the predicate X title, it appears at least once in the resource. You can have more than one, but not less than one. Oops, I hope. Yes, seems to work. And the next property is year, and we say it has to be an integer. Something that really makes sense to all of us. And again, for semantic web experts, it might look really too simple, too easy, but I just wanted to show people that it works. And here is a small demo. I probably should show you. Here is data that we're trying to validate. Maybe I should try to zoom in. And it's LDSV 18, which is an instance of a conference class. It has a title, and it has a year, but a year is actually a string. It doesn't say the right year, but it says hello. When we try to validate it, and the shape was shown on the right, and it's the same I showed in the slides, you get a proper validation report telling you that this property year has a violation, and there is a violation of type data type constraint, and a computer system can make use of it. And a computer system also has access to these shapes, so they actually can know what do you expect from them before they send you data. And sure enough, if we change the year to 2018, you have validation that passes. All right. Just a question, am I losing someone? Or are there any questions? You had something.
I just said 5 minutes.
All right. Let's see. I'll try. Access control. Again. That's a weak step. You'll have to figure it out more. Resource changes. First option, again, no standards. Let's start easy. You have a resource that you know about, and you just keep polling it. Basically, you hit refresh button in your browser, so to speak, every 5 minutes. But the problem is it's wasteful. You need to refresh every resource so frequently. It doesn't scale if you want to track 1 million resource updates from many linked data services across your enterprise. And it cannot help you track when new resources are created without any extra hacks. So a really simple approach. Let's have a server keep a change log of all changes that happen to all resources inside of it. And subscribers just keep retrieving this log, and they see if there are new entries to this log. And if there are some of interest, they go and they fetch this linked data resource. And that's basically OSLC TRS specification in a nutshell. It's still wasteful because frequently you will have a changelog not changing almost at all, but it does scale really well. And it especially scales well because you have one changelog for all consumers. So you can very efficiently cache it using modern techniques for developing web services. And it's easy to implement, again, because it doesn't hold extra state. But you know, it's not really modern just to keep fetching a changelog. So what I call a Hollywood style, or I didn't invent it. Don't call us, we'll call you. This is a W3C recommendation, a linked data identification standard. You basically have a concept of a notification inbox, and this is something that you talked about. They make use of, Solid makes use of LDP. And the idea is that you subscribe somehow to updates on a resource, and then the server keeps a link to your notification inbox. And when something happens, they send a notification message into your inbox. The downside is that if 1,000 people subscribe to one resource, every time you hit save button on that resource, your server has to send 1,000 notifications to all subscribers. It actually doesn't sound as bad as it is. Search. So when you hit, say, 1 million resources, just paging them is also not that good. So we're back again to Sparkle. We can somehow try to negotiate with our database administrator saying that it will be just a read-only access. There are 3 extra things. TPF, triple pattern fragments, we briefly talked about it. It's more advanced than Sparkle. It allows you to take a load of Sparkle. It's research, it's really cool, I encourage you to look at it. But it requires more advanced client. If you actually want to go back from Sparkle in the reverse direction and make it even easier for clients, there are OSLC queries, which is a very simple where clause. Basically in SQL you have where and then there is a clause. So that's basically a grammar roughly duplicating it. So you can say, give me all collections where year is greater than 2015, and you'll get a collection of RDF resources that satisfy this. And there is Hydra, which is just a free text. So now let's bring this all together to the end. We have all these features, and the only thing we need is a way to discover all these capabilities that we talked about. And here there is LDP. Again, there are some options. OSLC provides these and other things, plus Hydra. And here is actually a demo of OSLC-based integration of Jira and Polarian.
You must
So
be quick now.
it will be like under 2 minutes. So this is making use of discovery features. There was authentication across 2 different apps. You see it all happening in one window, but in fact that application, that window authorizing things shows up from a different application. And also the list of projects also loads from another application, in this case from Jira. And this demo is about, this demo is about actually making use, how users would use this linked data integration. So they go in Polarian, and they go into a system requirement, and they want to create a new link. And here you have discovery of all different kind of resources that can be linked from Jira. These are also a little bit more advanced features from OSLC that allow you to show dialogues across applications. Wait. And here is basically the main takeaway from the presentation. So this link is not actually a resource that is stored inside of Polarian, but is actually a resource that is inside of Jira. And this server only holds a link to it. And the information about this resource can be retrieved in RDF. Or you can get a UI preview, which is also an advanced feature. I hope I managed to somehow make you think that linked data is useful, and maybe you'll build some linked data services afterwards. I know I'm standing between you and your train. Thank you all for listening. It's a pleasure.
There was a lot of technologies there.
I apologize in advance.
So, I liked it. So, yes. You're leaving before we got a question. Do we got a question? No. Okay, everyone is a bit tired. All right, so we're a bit behind schedule, but luckily for us, we just had the flexibility of having a discussion point. What did we call it? An open discussion, concluding remarks, and exit to social event, which is kind of flexible, I guess. We originally thought that we should have a panel debate, but it was cancelled because of various reasons. And I moved the questions that I thought of from the panel debate down to this as like an open discussion. So I'm wondering whether we should have them there or not. Maybe just one of the things that maybe I would like to have your input on is that we're going to have a new agency this autumn. It's the new digitalization agency, which is taking over part of work from other agencies. If there is one agency that should push for linked data in Sweden, I think it is that new digitization agency. So I think it would be at least interesting to ponder what kind of message as a linked data community could we give that digitization agency? Is there anything that we should say that, okay, if you just do one thing with linked data in Sweden, this is it? The floor is open. Yeah. Ja, visst.
Att jag som datahållare inte ska liksom sätta mig i utvecklarens skor och liksom hitta på vad de ska använda min data till. Utan det ska liksom programmerarna själva få avgöra vad de ska göra av. Det kan vara lätt att man tror det när man sitter med data. Tänker att, ja men vad kan någon vilja ha det här till? Det ska man inte göra. Det är jag som sitter med all fantasi. Det ska man inte låta.
So basically saying that you shouldn't try to second guess who's taking the data, what they should use it for. You should just push it out. That's an open data argument, and that's actually written part in the law that you shouldn't actually provide data just because you know who's going to use it and for what purpose. It's more like just put it out and encourage people to put data out, and they will use it for whatever purpose they have.
If I hold data, I'm not supposed to pretend that I'm developing it. I'm supposed to let them do whatever the data can be used for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think one point we, not particularly about linked data, but more wide. Yeah. I don't know who was first. Yeah, start.
I know that lots of authorities publish data just because they are forced to publish data, and it's out there on the website, and then they have done their task, so to say. There should be some push for also publishing it in a meaningful way that can be useful. So that more requirements will be available in a useful way and not only available.
Okay, so the focus on usability of the data.
Non-proprietary storage solution that you mentioned, I think that's a step forward.
Okay, would a non-proprietary solution for linked data?
Storing data, like if I select something on a web page, you can store it and
Okay.
But
Yeah.
what problem is with the proprietary solution if it follows all the linked standards?
Yeah, so it's actually it's another dimension. It's another. The openness question is are you maybe your portability is as long as you have portability, it doesn't matter if it's a proprietary solution. But I'm still okay. I'm going to push you now. The linked data issue. Like, where do we have the linked data push for this new agency? Miles?
So the point I was trying to get to in my presentation, but I ran out of time, typical, is that this, so I used the term user-centric design, that old term, and I said that there's a new term, self-sovereign. And this term is coined, the guy's name is Christopher Allen. He's on Twitter, he's involved in the W3C. And the idea is that the way we use data in society has to have a fundamental, the idea that you just put the data out there and see what people will do with it. This is a great idea. Everybody's asking, but how do we actually do that? Do it for the individual first. For the individual, and specifically for the individual's identity. And specifically, actually, for the identities of immigrants and stateless persons. And so, for instance, when I think Ruben Verborg in Ghent is actually, this is one of the things he's trying to do with linked data as well. Push technology, push linked data into identifying immigrants, people who are becoming stateless, so that there is you can find a URL, you can find their data no matter where you find them. If it's built on the person the way Sweden is trying to build your society, if the data follows that ethic, then, well, yeah, there's still problems, but they're different problems.
So the data portability, the data follows the persons, the decentralized approach to data,
Yes.
All that. Are there good reasons for using linked data for that? Because I hear that from multiple persons, but what's the case for? Is linked data an important part of that message, or can we easily use another set of technologies for that?
It was at the end of your presentation, the last slide that you showed, the quote from Dan Brickley. Yes, we have to use linked. Linked data is the only way.
Oh, that's good. We'll take that one.
I think that your comment in the end of our discussion here is that everyone agrees that publishing things on the web is a good idea.
Yes.
And the only meaningful way of getting the web meaningful is to link the things on the web.
Yes.
So it's an analogy between the web and the data that's important, I think.
Right. So the push to the new agency, I'm keeping to the topic, is to basically say data is as native to web as web pages, and it should be as obvious that you put them out in a linked data format, or some format that can be transformed to linked data, as that you are putting out the web pages. Yes. Then you can build more complex stuff on top of it.
Store it if you're just a person, but if you have some data that you're like making with your phone walking around, you produce data, where should you store it? Like you have to own accounts and you have to upload it to some proprietary vendors.
Yes.
How can we make that not happen?
Okay, so personal storage solutions that can be hosted elsewhere and maybe installed in your own cloud or whatever, that kind of solution. Yeah. That seems to be a hot topic. Carl?
I don't want to disappoint you because I've met Sarah and I've met people who worked with it a little bit, and it's great brilliant stuff in theory, but in practice, if you try to use it today, it does not work.
Absolutely true. Absolutely.
And I have a hard time seeing that it will work by the end of the year. I'm sorry, but I hope I'm wrong, of course. But this is a very pregnant point you're making. Is that we need somewhere where a normal person, i.e., not myself or you guys, can actually deploy this stuff. I don't think that's part of the digitalization agency or whatever that discussion was about, but certainly a problem with this vision.
I think some of the people here made the point at the last break that linked data needs not good engineers, there's plenty of us, in linked data, but a visionary or two. And there's, what you say is definitely true. It's not ready for public use now, but there's some visionary solutions to this very problem you put your finger on, and I think it's I think this is the end.
Could I suggest we move on from that integrity issue? Although it is an interesting one, I would like to see more aspects of what we could say to such an agency, because I think we will have some opportunity to push them to some way towards linked data. As a company from Meta Solutions side, we will at least try. So one thing that we have been thinking on was to maybe we should try to take inspiration from the Nordic countries. Denmark and Norway and Finland all have their own national vocabularies for describing whatever is going on in the public sector. Maybe that's something we need in Sweden. And would that help us to make our linked data sources better in the municipalities or in the private sector or NGOs? Would it help us to describe our data better if we had the national vocabulary? Or should we rely on the European ones? And maybe that's not something we need to do in Sweden.
I think we need a concerted way to have set up core vocabularies that are related to public service, because if you're going to publish open data as a public agency, and you can connect that to a vocabulary that is aligned, that everybody well, not agree on the conceptual meaning of everything, but at least it is tagged with a decency of using it in the same vocabulary. I mean, the UK have had their integrated public service vocabulary for, what is it, 10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. It's not a perfect one, but it is at least one.
All right.
Yeah.
So we will be a bit of a shaming of Sweden, saying, come on, like all these Nordic countries have it, Great Britain has it, so we should have it as well. And we probably have something we can start from using. Where is the people from statistical Sweden? No, they moved. They left. Okay.
But I mean,
yeah, they should probably have something.
Yeah, they are working on it in a collaboration project with Companies House and statistics and tax authorities.
Yeah.
Actually, so they have something going on,
but not as linked data.
No.
Okay.
Maybe it's worth to kind of split linked data or open data, because I think that's what the government is after. And I mean, we all talk about vocabularies and ontologies, and while they are data, they are basically a data model. So maybe we need to talk about not only opening the data, but also opening the models that describe the data. Yes. I'm just trying to make it more simple.
Yes.
And then vocabularies and ontologies are a natural way to solve this problem.
Yes, that's something we've been talking about with SQL about, for instance, a little bit. And maybe it's a good task for the new agency to provide some kind of national specifications, data models and stuff like that, in addition to the vocabularies.
How much are you using these FAIR principles to push things? Because I mean, in the science community, that has quickly, just over the night, it became a consensus about this is how everything should be done, and it's pushing, I think, in publishing.
So it's a good question. Like, how many here in this room feel like that? I know FAIR like it was in my back pocket. FAIR. Okay, not very many, and still people are in the linked data community. So I think that the FAIR is probably not. I haven't really. I've heard it, but I haven't looked in.
It's new.
It's okay, new. So maybe it's something we need to read up on.
But it's like the perfect argument for linked data in my view.
Okay, good point.
I mean, the abbreviation, what it stands for. I mean, it's just it should be findable. It should be it should be useful information, and that is what it's all about. I mean, if you dump petabytes of data into a huge lake, and you don't have a model, and you don't have any kind of linkages between the data sets and the descriptors, it will be just a waste of time. We will build this landfill I just showed, and that's where FAIR comes in, because I mean, to build relevant use cases, I mean, you have to have that in sight when you create data. That's it.
And now my point in this case is that there's such a strong consensus now on it. Everything is supposed to be fair now.
So it's like homework for us to read up on it.
If you look, if you Google "fair is not enough," a paper, some articles will come up. Fair is extremely important. It's very positive, but there's also the argument being made that it's not enough.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I want to expand on that just if I may for a second. The recommendation to the new agency to explore creating standardized vocabularies like other nations have. Of course, that's a good idea. Of course, that makes sense, and it builds a foundation for many things to grow on. But it may also, but if that's the focus, that may be a lost opportunity. Nordic countries are different. You have more social trust than other countries. Come up with a different way to do this. Don't just try to create, don't be German. Find something more, everything now, because if you're defining big models to fit into your institutional frameworks, if you're defining service models and all this like Finland is trying to do with my data is a great project. It's not catching. It's like many of these projects, brilliant technically, great people, not catching on yet. It's a good step. But there's potential now for the whole thing to slide. But part of that is that linked data is not here to replicate and strengthen our existing political, economic, and social arrangements. They're here so we can change them, so we can fluidize them, so we can more safely let it kind of fall apart and come back together instead of just crash. Please, Sweden.
We need to be creative. Okay. A little bit hard to do it, like 4 minutes left to...
What it is, like it is different people having different viewpoints, different eyes see different things in reality. So if we have people that see different things in reality and contributing to a centric data storage, then you can make dozens of vocabularies just by integrating people.
Okay. I think we need to wrap it up a bit here, unfortunately. There's not many minutes left. I think just a couple of concluding remarks. First, I hope you all enjoyed today and all the presentations. Good work of everyone that made an effort to present all interesting things. The format, it's more or less the same as we have had a couple of years. We have, it's like, what do you say, stafettpinne? You leave it over to the next person to do it next year. And I think I'm going to leave it here to Gothenburg. Is that okay with you?
Okay.
Okay. So next.
Is it 3 years ago? 2014 is actually 4 years ago.
Yeah. So okay, it's okay. So the order has been Stockholm, Linköping, Malmö, Gothenburg. Now, and then it repeated itself. Stockholm, Linköping, and then we went for Uppsala. Whoa. I don't see anyone representing Malmö here today. I feel that it will be a bit hard to push it on someone that's not being here. And you did a marvelous job last time.
Yeah, it was fun.
Do you think it will be doable in Gothenburg next year?
Yeah.
Great.
I was just thinking, I mean, maybe we should consider all going to Sundsvall.
That was an idea we discussed briefly. Also, would we push it to Sundsvall? But, well, I think we need to get to know them a bit first.
But it's not a huge linked data community, but
no.
We can occupy them. Activists, LD activists.
Well, can we at least have a fallback strategy for Gothenburg next year? Okay, that brings me to the next question. Do I have more questions? Okay, yes, before we forget. So we have the social event tonight for those that want to stay still and continue talking. I don't know if you know where it is. Should I open?